Chair. It's arriving today.
It's a great
Shavua Tov,
investment for lots of reasons.
Shavua Tov, everyone. I have so it's 10 o'clock. Cantor Nimi again has something for us. And I think we have to give an extra special thanks to Cantor Nimi. Cantor Nimi is not only a working cantor at a congregation out in Wisconsin, he is also one time zone before us. So he often starts his day extra early so that he can do what he needs to, log on for class, sing for us, does the beautiful formatting of his text for us, and then goes to be the cantor of his synagogue. So let's give Cantor Nimi a little extra special Psalms class love this morning as I pull up his screen. Cantor Nimi, you are here, correct?
I am. Thank you, friends. And today happens to be my day off too, so it's a wonderful way to spend the morning. And my only other plan today is actually to vote. So I fortunately live about a 7-minute walk from the county clerk's office in Madison. So I thought that today, since my understanding is that we're continuing where we left off last week with Psalm 98. So if I'm mistaken, this will still be a sweet way to start. And so I thought, why not start the week with something sweet and familiar and soothing and comforting? So a very familiar melody for Zamru Ladonai Bechinor. And if you think that we've done this melody during this class, you would be correct, because we did it when we were looking at Psalm 9, because there is a phrase in this psalm that is also in Psalm 9, Yishpot Tevel B'tzedek, and then here it's Ve'amim B'mesharim, and there it's Ve'umim or Le'umim B'mesharim. So very, very similar. And so this is the I think probably the most widely known melody for this text, certainly at CBST, from my recollection. And I should turn on my original sound. There we go. Zamru Ladonai Bechinor, Bechinor V'kol Zimra. There we go. Let's try that one more time. Zamru Ladonai Bechinor, Bechinor V'kol Zimra, B'chatzotzrot V'kol Shofar. Hariu Lifnei HaMelech Adonai, Yiram Hayam Umlo, Tevel V'yoshvei Va, Neharot Imcha Uchaf, Yachad Harim Yiranenu, Lifnei Adonai Kiva, Kiva Lishpot Haaretz, Lishpot Tevel B'tzedek, Ve'amim B'mesharim, Yiram Hayam Umlo, Tevel V'yoshvei Va, Neharot Imcha Uchaf, Yachad Harim Yiranenu, Yachad Harim Yiranenu.
Thank you, Cantor. My goodness, exactly as you said. How sweet, how absolutely delightful and delicious is a way for us to start our study this week, continuing through the set. And just so everybody has kind of a sense of what the week holds in store for us, today we're going to study Psalms 98 and 99, because I think that with the two of them together, we get such an incredible sense of the fullness of what we experience in this rubric, this matched set of Psalms that goes together for Kabbalat Shabbat. If we've got time, we probably won't, but just in case, we might sneak 93 in there because it's a perfect bridge between the two of them. Chronologically, not so perfect, but thematically, I think you'll be struck by how much it echoes all of the pieces that we've been talking about. And then tomorrow we'll study Psalm 29 If we've got extra time, maybe we'll stick 93 in there. Wednesday, we'll study Psalm 92, the final one that at CBST we sing, even though traditionally 93 comes after, but 92 has such an incredibly special place for all of us, as we spoke about at the very beginning last week, setting this foundation, that for CBST, Psalm 92 is really, you know, it's so much our sacred text. It's the one on our Aron HaKodesh. If you needed a mission statement for a synagogue, you could probably look to whatever's on the ark where the Torahs are held, and that's a pretty good indication of what's so central to a community's identity. So that's what we'll do on Wednesday. And then on Thursday, Cantor Nimi once again will be offering us musical selections of the Psalms we studied during this week, so that we can see all of the range of ways that we can express these words through music and have over time around the world, just like last week. And then as we go into Shabbat, just like last week, I think you'll notice special selections in the Shabbat menu that are reflective of the study that we have done together. So we move from the learning to the doing as we welcome in Shabbat. I'm delighted that Rabbi Kleinbaum is in class today. And, you know, she may invoke rabbinic privilege at any time. You know, what good is rabbinical school and the senior rabbinate of a congregation if you don't get to pause the associate rabbi and say, actually, what I wanted to say was. And this is our opportunity to really just like deepen our relationship with this rubric. And I'd be so interested to see if anybody wants to put into the chat the kind of emotional or intellectual association that you had with the Psalms on Kabbalat Shabbat, that you had when these came up. Has it changed for you at all? I know that people have reflected inside class that this is an opportunity that they haven't had before to study these words that were so familiar in a brand new light. So it's almost as if they're re-meeting these texts. But I'd be thrilled to see any reflections in the chat about what this Shabbat was like for you with this kind of relationship with the Psalms. And once again this week, Harold Levine is going to be sharing our text and making sure that he keeps an eye out for the virtually raised hands. And Yael Bat Chava is keeping an eye on the chat for me, so that first of all, if there are any Hebrew questions, you've got an expert in the chat. But also, you know, if it's a difficult thing to virtually raise your hand, or if there's a straightforward question that you just wanted to put in the chat, Yael can pause me and ask those questions. And of course, I'll take a couple moments to check in on where the chat is. That doesn't mean that every individual person needs to follow the chat, unless it's a thing you love to do in Psalms class. And it's it's a unique blessing of our Zoom reality that, like, if you're a person who loves to whisper in the pews, this is just like the universe was made for you on this day. You can keep a running commentary on everything I say without any consequence and no one going shh. So just to sort of recap us, bring us back, ground us in our study, the extraordinary thing about Kabbalat Shabbat and the Psalms that are associated with it is that the book of Psalms has such a range. Right? In your study over these months, you've seen that the types of narrations differ. The address of the Psalms can be so different. The language that is used is rich and varied. The themes and the emotional coloring of every one of the Psalms can be so different. And it's, you know, staggering to think that all of this is contained in one book, you know, 150 poems, and you get that much range. And certainly within the book of Psalms, there are Psalms that very closely relate to each other, some that bridge, you know, over the numbers, no matter what the numbering is, some that pick up, as Cantor Nimi was saying, direct quotations or allusions to words and themes that had come before them. But Psalms 95 through 99 in particular are so tightly knit together. And I can't think of another set of Psalms that is so carefully and closely in line and then used with this kind of regularity so that those themes continue to be revealed over and over again. Even when we look to Psukei de Zimra in the Saturday morning liturgy for Shabbat morning, you don't see quite the close unification of all these themes. And so that's what's so special about the Kabbalat Shabbat Psalms. That's why I've been using the word rubric to describe them, because it's not a disparate collection. You know, not only are they united in their subject matter, but chronologically to be that close together, It's pretty incredible. And so it definitely warrants at least 2 weeks of study, probably a whole lifetime of study.
Rabbi,
Yes.
before you start, I will just say that having monitored chat on Friday, I saw so many people in this class talking about how much more the Psalms meant to them, having studied them just for the several days last week. And I also have received a number of questions, not to answer today, but perhaps towards the end on Wednesday,
Oh,
that
sure.
given that all of these Psalms are together in full, we do not recite all of them together in full in our own service. And from week to week, we may have a different selection of what we read, which parts of it we read, and which melodies we use. And as one of the people who puts our service together, I thought that you might be able to spend a little time sharing with us the process that the clergy goes through to decide on a week-to-week basis which psalms from which verses from which psalms we will be either reciting or singing, and which tunes we would use from week to week.
And what a great day. You've got 2 rabbis in the room. You've got the person who really like sets the imprint and the person who gets to carry it out. So we can save that question for like,
Yes.
10:35 and return to it. And maybe Rabbi Kleinbaum and I can both contribute something.
And if I could add, there was also a question in the chat just now. Why is Psalm 29 so important that we recite the entire psalm? So if you could
Absolutely.
address
I might
that question
save
at the
that
same time.
question for our day that we study Psalm 29, but it's on my mind too. And it's one of the things, Psalm 29 gets this insertion. Psalm 92 and 93, we talked about how 94 doesn't really match the same like tone of gratitude and excitement. It's got a lot of vengeance in it, which everybody needs every once in a while. But Psalm 29 is an immovable piece of the Kabbalat Shabbat service. How to get there? Why? We're going to look into it. So as another recap, I have sort of laid out 3 themes that we see in all of these Kabbalat Shabbat rubrics. Psalms, I didn't make them up. I don't want to take credit for them. But number 1, recognition of the natural world and lots of different similes and metaphors and allusions to the way that the natural world plays into our gratitude and appreciation of God's creation, and the recognition of God as sovereign, and all of this language reflecting sovereignty, the one who has ordered the heavens and the earth, the author and the artist of creation. So we take note of these incredible aspects of creation and we put them into the language of praise as we're directing it to God, who is uniquely sort of referenced as sovereign in a bunch of different Hebrew synonyms for that term. So those are the 3 things that we're looking for as we look to these 2 Psalms. Natural aspects of the world, reflecting those days of creation, because we're still in the 6 leading up to Psalm 92, which is the Psalm for Shabbat, the 7th day. How God is referenced as the genius mind behind all of this. We're going to get more into that in 92. And then our gratitude and appreciation and all the different ways we express it through words and otherwise to keep track of all of the miracles that we encounter every day. So what we're going to do today, we're going to do 2 Psalms. That means we're going to do Hebrew, English of both the Psalms, so that we really get this like opportunity to compare and contrast the themes that we see. I love 98 and 99 because I think that they demonstrate a different scope of each of those 3 things. They focus on really different aspects. So it's a perfect thing to line up against each other, to see the bridges you can create between, but especially the differences. So I would love some Hebrew readers and some English readers to volunteer in the chat. And then we'll start with the Hebrew of Psalm 98. Do I have a Hebrew reader?
What page are we on?
Michael, we're on the screen.
Michael, thank you very much. In the CBSTC door, which we will be sharing the translations from for these Psalms, Psalm 98 is on page 58 in the Hebrew. 58 in the Hebrew, the translation is on 59, and then Psalm 99 is on page 60 and 61.
Rabbi, do you want me to show our Siddur or the Sefaria?
let's start with the Safaria. Also gives
Okay.
us a lovely sense of like the English interlinear, and then we'll jump to our own CBST Sidor's translation. And if Marcia wants to comment, or if anybody's looking closely at the end notes about the authorship of these translations, that is very much invited. So I see Saul Zalkin's hand. Saul, are you willing to read in Hebrew?
Sure.
Awesome, thank you.
Mizmor. Shiru Adonai Shir Chadash, Ki Niflaot Asa, Hoshia Lo Yemino, Uzroa Kadsho. Hodia Adonai Yeshuato, Le'enei Hagoyim Gilat Sidkato. Zachar Chasdo Ve'emunato, Leveit Yisrael, Ra'u Chol Avsei Aretz, Et Yeshuat Eloheinu. Hariyu Adonai Kol Haaretz, Pischu V'ranenu V'zameru. Zamru Adonai Bechino V'kol Zimra, B'chatzot Tzrot B'kol Shofar, Hariyu Lifnei HaMelech Adonai. Yiram Hayam Umloo, Tevel V'yoshvei Bach, Neharot Yimchahu Chaf, Yachad Harim Yiranenu. Lifnei Adonai Kiba.
No, keep going. I was distracted.
Lifnei Adonai Kiba Lishpot Haaretz, Yishpot Tevel B'tzedek, Ba'amim B'meisharim.
Thank you, Saul. Well read. All right, I see that Linda Solomon has a hand raised for the English. Let's give Harold just a second to switch between screens, bring up our own translation from Bechol Vavcha, which, if you're following along in the physical book, is page 59.
Are you seeing that?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
here is the,
Back up. Here we go. All right. And Linda will be our reader.
We come here singing a new song for all your wonders. Your mighty hand and divine power show themselves in victories of justice. You make known your divine deliverance, revealing your righteousness. Lovingly, you are mindful of those who wrestle and struggle with you. We shout out praises to Adonai, bursting forth singing and playing music. Bring out praises with melodious song, plucking your praise on strings. With shofar blasts and horn playing, we praise the sovereign of all. Let the sea and all within roar, the world and its inhabitants. Let rivers clap hands with glee, together with mountains in joyful chorus. For you will awaken the world to justice, judging all by what is fair and just, judging all by what is right and true.
I think I kind of revealed which is my absolute favorite line of this song because I had to interrupt Saul. I was so like touched by its words. Harold, could you zoom out just a teeny bit so everybody could see the whole translation of the psalm? We don't need the Abraham Joshua Heschel quote at the bottom. There we go. So it's a little, but everybody sort of gloss over it with your eyes. Think of the three themes of sovereignty, of natural wonder, and appreciation. Keep in mind some of the phrases that really stick out to you. And then we are going to move to Psalm 99 in comparison.
would you like the Safaria back then, Rabbi?
Yes, please, Harold. Thank you so much.
Okay. Whoops, sorry.
And can I see another Hebrew reader, a willing Hebrew reader for Psalm 99?
Sarah Sloan requested.
Fabulous. Thanks, Sarah.
Adonai Malach Yirgezu Amim, Yoshev Pruvim Tanut Haaretz. Adonai B'Tzion Gadol, V'ram Hu Al Kol Ha'amim. Yodu Shimcha Gadol, V'Nora Kadosh Hu. V'oz Melech Mishpat, Ohev Ata Konat Misharim, Mishpat Utzaka B'Yakov, Ata Asita. Romamu Adonai Eloheinu, V'ishtachavu lahadam raglav, Kadosh Hu. Moshe v'Aaron b'kohanav, U'Shmuel b'korei shmo, Korim el Adonai v'hu ya'anem. בעמוד ענן ידבר אלוהים, שמרו עדותיו וחוק נתן לעמו. אדוני אלוהינו, אתה עניתם אל נשא היית להם, ונקם על עלילותם. רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להר קדשו, כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו.
Wonderful, Sarah. Thank you. All right. And if you are in our CBS TC door, the translation of Psalm 99 is on page 61. I recall that Judy Frank wanted to read in the English. I think that was in the chat. Judy, are you able to unmute yourself? Any luck? All right, well, we'll save another reading opportunity for Judy for sure. Is there another person who would like to read this translation in English from B'chol Levacha? Oh, Judy, yes, well done.
Okay. You are sovereign. People stand in awe. Earth trembles. May all sing your praise. Great, awesome, holy are you. Lovers of justice, know your inspired fairness, honesty and righteousness, establishing just rule for all. Worship the Holy One. Bow as before the throne of God, who indeed is holy. The prophets and priests of your people invoked your name for guidance and help. Time and again they called to you. Ever you responded, answering their pleas. In a pillar of cloud you spoke to them, giving them laws. They accepted your teaching, though you made them pay for their misdeeds. Worship the Eternal One. Bow at the mountain of God. Holy indeed are you, our God.
Lovely. Well read, Judy. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
So Harold, let's give everybody a second to just sort of gloss this with their eyes, thinking about the three themes and what they see most forward in this particular psalm, especially as compared to Psalm 98. Nature, sovereignty, gratitude.
Rabbi, I want to point out that in the chat, some people were asking about the custom of singing Shir HaShirim in some synagogues before the Kabbalat Shabbat service. and Cantor Nimi responded that it's a Sephardi Mizrahi custom.
What would I do without Cantor Nimi?
Well, I'd
Thank you
also
so
like
much.
to add to that the CBSTC door, because we're trying to reflect different Jewish cultural customs. If you look at page 44 in your CBSTC door, you see we have selections from Shir HaShirim from page 44 to 49 immediately before we go into the Psalms of Kabbalat Shabbat. So that reflects that tradition. And in a Mizrahi or a Sephardi synagogue, they often will read through the entire Shir HaShirim, sometimes different men, and it's usually in all male Sephardi synagogues, different men take on different chapters and it goes around the kahal, it gets shared and the community sings it out together. But that is exactly why we have it in the CBSTC door before Kabbalat Shabbat.
And you may, for those of you who were present on Friday night this week, Shir HaShirim has, especially all of these naturalistic allusions that you see in the Kabbalat Shabbat Psalms. Because it was Shabbat Noach this week, I started part of Kabbalat Shabbat with a meditation on many waters cannot drown love, nor can the rivers overcome it. Love is as strong as death. The themes are very closely knit together. It's not a completely random assortment. And it echoes many of the kind of relational ideas that we can take as a grand metaphor for the people of Israel and God. You see that really beautifully reflected in Lecha Dodi, which we're going to study in my Lashon Kodesh class, our liturgy class focusing much more on all of the parts of Kabbalat Shabbat and the Shabbat Mariv service itself, but they're not Psalms, so we're not going to focus on them right now. Harold, if you could bring the screen down so we could all see each other's faces. There are just a couple of points that I want to lay out in terms of foundational observations before we jump into what everybody's noticing and loves or wrestles with, as Psalm 98 said, about these two Psalms. First of all, I wanted you to notice that Psalm 98 is much more focused on those natural allusions than Psalm 99. Psalm 99 is pretty singular in its focus on God's sovereignty. I think if I had to pick one definitional, like if I had to pick one psalm to illustrate each of these three themes, I'd absolutely go for Psalm 99 as the one that illustrates God as ruler on high and all of the different ways that we address God in that particular role. But Psalm 98 has those beautiful, beautiful allusions to the natural world in it. I love the lines, you know, the sea and all within it roar, the rivers clap hands with glee, together with the mountains in joyful chorus, personifying these natural wonders. And in Psalm 99, something that I wanted to point out. So 99 is translated by Yehuda Berger, and 98 didn't have a notation in the endnotes. Marcia or Rabbi Kleinbaum, does that mean Rabbi Cohen translated it, or?
No, I would bet this is a scribal error. I would bet, I don't remember exactly.
Torah scrolls have them.
And I think that probably Yehuda translated it, since he really translated them all with only the exceptions we listed. So that's my bet, and we made a mistake by not including it on the page. But that, Marcia, do you remember any better than that?
I don't think so, Rabbi. I think there was a decision for ones that either maybe came from the Blue Shmata or from the previous Sidur, B'chol Vavcha, the very first one, or even from the rabbis, from you and Rabbi Cohen, as a not to, it was a joint effort. Is that possible?
But we usually mark that, I think, when one of us did the translations.
Well, if it was Rabbi Cohen, yes, alone. And anyway, I think it may have been a combination of
we should have kept our notes.
efforts.
You kept great notes. There are a lot of notes to choose from.
Anyway.
So in Psalm 99, the translation is pretty specific. If you look into the Hebrew of Psalm 99, in the part that the English says the prophets and the priests of your people, we've got a list of names in the Hebrew. It says Moshe, the Aharon, and then later it says Ushmuel. Those are Moses, Aaron, and Samuel. A really interesting triumvirate. So you've got Moses, who is the teacher who speaks panim el panim with God, face to face in direct congress. Aaron is the priest, and Samuel is the prophet. So you've got this like tricameral system of ancient Israel, that you've got the leader who eventually gets represented as king in the age of Samuel. You have the priest who is responsible for the temple cult, and then you have the prophet who is responsible for the visionary statements, and especially the reminder to the people of Israel about how to treat one another. But the prophet Micah also mentions this tricameral system in one of his very famous readings, the one that also says, do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. And instead of naming Samuel, Micah names Miriam. So you get that same system of Moses as the leader and the teacher, Aaron as the priest, but Miriam, who in the text is cited as a Neviah, as a prophet, she's the representative of the prophetic voice. That is not what you see here. And I really like this translation, indicating that there are so many different ways that one communicates with God, that, you know, every person can have their own voice in this conversation. The last thing I wanted to point out was in Psalm 98, we get this introduction of musical instruments. And this is only my own interpretation and midrash on the subject. If any cantor in the room wants to contribute, you absolutely can. You see a lot of instrumentation in the Psalms. You get it especially in Psukei de Zimra, the Shabbat morning service. You think of Psalm 150 and all the different voices of the instruments, an entire orchestra resounding with hallelujah. But these musical instruments are a really fascinating step. You know, we've been so in awe of the natural world and God's creation. Musical instruments are the creation of humanity. They're a way that we ascribe this beauty to our world, that we transmute it and shape it with our own voices and with our own creation. And in this way, we are like God. So I think it's particularly striking that the closer and closer we get to the recitation of Psalm 92, which is for the seventh day, you get this recognition that people too have creative power and creative force. People too have that same kind of sovereignty that they can impose on the natural order of the world and even change and shift it. We really have our own power. And it's symbolized in this particular aspect that we have to be grateful for, the musical instruments, and not just the natural instruments of our voices. So those were the things I wanted to point out. What struck you about these two Psalms, especially, you know, well, one or the other is totally fine, but especially when said together, because I wanted to use this day as an opportunity to remind us that each of these Psalms has their own character, but the reason why we're studying them now is because they all sing together and we all sing them together.
Saul Zalkin has his hand up.
So I think in 98, humankind and creation, the earth, is praising God together, not separately. And in 99, we're coming to Shabbat, because by the end, it says, we're bowing at the mountain of God. Holy indeed is God. Well, what happens at the mountain, as one of the commandments was, to observe the Shabbat and keep it holy.
Wonderful. I love that. Thank you, Saul. And of course, you know, in Psalm 99, you get that repetition of the recitation, Romemu Adonai Eloheinu, which is, I don't know how many of us recognize that wasn't just its own one-liner. That's a theme that's repeated through Psalm 99.
Jeffrey Weiss.
This is going to sound a little out of the ordinary, but you know what came to my mind hearing those two Psalms?
Tell me.
Bob Dylan's songs "Blowing in the Wind." I feel like he's combined, it's like when I saw that, combined both Psalms about the earth and social justice together.
Yeah, well, I mean, those are like animating forces of great folk music, right? I love the thought of Psalms as folk music. You know, some of our original folk music that we're still singing. It's pretty definitionally accurate.
That's how I connect with it, with his songs, believe it or not.
Great observation, Jeffrey. Thank you.
Rabbi, Yael has left, and so I am monitoring chat also. And we have a question, just the little translation of the word Romamu and how it winds up as a synagogue name also.
Sure. So hidden within the word Romamu is the root Ram, which means high, heightened, in the heights, all of these different sort of like lofty attributions. And if you've got oo at the end of a word, often it's a hint that this is a collective noun. This is for all of us. How did Yehuda translate Romamu? I love worship the Holy One. You know, offer these praises to the heights. I also see a question of the misdeeds of the Israelites in Psalm 99. It's not sort of a unified voice of graciousness. There's a little reminder here, and I forget who observed this, but I really liked it, that not all the Psalms, even in Kabbalat Shabbat, are all goodness and light. You know, they're not all happy clappy. There are some dark themes that repeat through them. I'm thinking especially of Psalm 95. You know, today, if to your voice we would but listen, 40 years, a complete generation, you put up with us. That's one of the things I really love about these Psalms, that even in their joyful quality, they don't just erase any other kind of emotion, that you find within them all of these peaks and valleys of the human experience of emotion and God's experience of emotion, which is maybe reflected within us as B'Tselem Elohim, as made in God's image, that God can be angry and God can hold a grudge, and God still feels the hurt that was wrought upon God by these misdeeds, or by when we ignore God, just as we feel the same way.
Linda Solomon has her hand up.
Yes, Linda.
Yes, I have a phone call here. I've got to.
Wait, we're going to have to mute you then, Linda.
Okay, no, I'm not taking it. I had to mute the phone call. But what I was thinking is that passage where it talks about though you were made to pay, though you made them pay for their misdeeds.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is like the proper parent who doesn't let you get away with anything. You have to really step to the line and be proper, and that's showing God as the proper parent.
Interesting. I like that. You know, very Avinu Malkeinu, as we were talking
Yes.
about that intimate relationship as well as that, you know, extraordinary and distant relationship. Additionally, I think it was Cantor Allen who in the chat said there is another theme weaving through these Psalms, not with quite as perfect echoes, but consistently and regularly this theme of justice. And so what does it mean if we are reminded that people have to pay for their misdeeds? Maybe the scales of justice are being balanced, which is the kind of world that we sort of long to see, maybe in a very childlike sense of that things should be fair. People should pay for their misdeeds, even if often in the world as it is, we don't see that coming true. It's an aspiration that we express in our Psalms. Other reflections or questions, especially with these two together?
Right, there are no more hands up at the moment. Cantor Nimi says in chat that he has a Sephardi Siddur where Psalm 120, 100, which raises a question for me, Rabbi, that I know that Kabbalat Shabbat service was introduced relatively recently, just a few hundred years ago, but it does take a rubric of Psalms in order, as we also see the morning service with Psalms 145 through 150, and the Psalms of Hallel that are in order. So the Psalms have been in this order since all the texts we have. They were put in this order by 300 BCE. However, we are finding meaning in the fact that these 5 Psalms together mean something as a group reflecting upon one another. I was just, do you think it's possible that these Psalms, that when the Psalms were numbered and put together, there was already a habit, a custom in the temple or someplace of saying these in this order? Or is it that just reading through the book, someone said, hey, listen, these 5 Psalms to me, I think would work for Shabbat, let's try it, and it became a custom?
I imagine that both probably have to be true, right? It did take somebody originally saying like, oh, we should try this instead. But I think that there very much is throughout human history a desire to categorize and to place like with like and unlike with unlike. I don't know if this is a positive, a negative, or just sort of a present without connotation quality of humanity. But think of all the ways that Judaism strives to categorize, putting things into neat little drawers and boxes of this is tameh and tahor, this is clean and unclean, kosher and unkosher. And in its worst exercise, this can be a way of exclusion and exclusion of people, exclusion of practices. But in its best, it is, let's collect these together. Let's put them in order so that from beginning to end, we get this unbelievable like push of praise that carries us through into Shabbat. That's the way we want to feel. But I think for the, will we ever discover the true answer to that question? If we do, it'll probably be through a professor of comparative literature and biblical linguistics and archaeology, and it's not something that I can answer off the top of my head. I see Barbara and Sarah who would like to share. And if we've got any time at the end, maybe Rabbi Kleinbaum and I can answer the question of, well, how do you pick the Psalms on what day for Shabbat?
So then let's do Sarah and then Barbara, and then we will turn to the two of you. How does that sound? Sarah.
Hi. To compare them, I'll get to that in a moment. Of course, let rivers clap hands with glee together with mountains in joyful choruses, like the most fun line ever.
Yes.
Fantastic. But the one that actually, I think that one was so distractingly fun that a really, really important one got missed by me at first. And I don't see the same tone in Psalm 99. lovingly you are mindful of those who wrestle and struggle with you.
Yes.
Is that a tone that is like, do we see that commonly? Because so far I'm limited to Psalms 1 through 12 now, and a couple others. The tone is much more like 99, which is that roller coaster of we love you, God, and but this whole thing of but we're going to get punished if we're not good, that kind of stuff is very common. But this one, I just love that. Lovingly, you are mindful of those who wrestle and struggle with you. Is that common in many other Psalms and we just haven't gotten there yet?
So this is the very root of the name Yisrael, right? And the exaltation of the idea of wrestling and being in conflict is unusual. I won't say it's singular, but it's definitely unusual to the Jewish people that the ideal type is the one who struggles. And it's sort of that story, it's got its tributaries throughout so much of Jewish existence and history and story, and you see it here in the Psalms. I have to say that this is a particularly lovely and somewhat creative translation on Yehuda's part. I mean, Sarah, your Hebrew is really strong, so I think that you can find beautiful connections and disconnects from that particular translation, which is an interpretation, and I think a very valid interpretation to the Hebrew in 98. But I love it. And I do see it within the Psalm that even, through Psalm 12, you don't always see this like ideal relationship with God. You see some disappointment in God. You see plenty of frustration. And what I think is sort of indicative of the conflict that's allowed to be, that's sacred in relationship. That the ideal relationship is not one where you get along perfectly all the time, because then you probably wouldn't talk about anything important.
And Barbara Brindell has our last word in participants today.
Okay, so ironically, it was the two lines that Sarah just mentioned on 98.
Yeah.
But I see a different aspect of it. The lines of let the sea and all that roar, the world and its inhabitants, and then the rivers clapping with glee. Well, I love the comparison between nature and people, traits of humanity with nature. So the sea is roaring as an animal might roar, or we might roar.
Yeah.
And then of course the rivers are clapping hands. I've just never seen those words together. And
it's
happily
gorgeous.
With glee, a river clapping hands, the imagery of that. So
again, it's deeply in the Hebrew, but it literally says, like the palms of their hands are coming together.
Exactly.
So it's a very accurate translation on the part of the translator. But yeah, that personification is just astounding. And I love it both for the intimacy to its relationship of humanity, that we can see ourselves in animal and vegetable and mineral. And also it's like a lot of hubris, right? To say that what the river does, what the river has done for thousands upon millions of years before we got there, is clap its hands. But I love it. It brings it deeply to us. And who was saying that it should be a Disney illustration? I like that too.
Thank you.
To see the animated river coming up to clap its hands.
Rabbi, we are actually at 10:43. So I think that perhaps we can table that discussion of how we choose them so we can have the cantors sing us out. Is that okay with you?
I think that's very okay. And there is so much to say, about the translation and the collection of the Psalms in this Siddur itself. There's a lot of like behind the curtain that can be drawn back that we can do as a class. Since we got through 2 today, I think we've got more time for the rest of the week to talk about all of those aspects and maybe a little bit more into the story of the Siddur itself.
Great. And I would just point out that I did send everyone the altar translation of all of the Psalms of Kabbalat Shabbat, so that if you're looking for a more literal translation with notes, you have it, because the translation in our Siddur is beautiful, but goes a few steps past literal to convey a particular meaning.
Absolutely. And I just want to point out what Jamie Beckenstein shared in the chat about the idea of lovingly you, like even the placement of a comma can change our entire view on the Psalm itself. So Cantor Nimi, let's sing to God.
All right. And folks are giving me ideas for what to bring for Thursday. I'm going to try to find some music that captures that sense of the rivers clapping hands, I'll give that some thought. All right, so we'll sing ourselves out with a little bit more of Zamru Ladonai Bechinor. Zamru Ladonai Bechinor, Bechinor v'kol zimra, בחצוצרות וקול שופר, הריעו לפני המלך אדוני, ירם הים ומלואו, תבל ויושבי בה, נהרות דמחה וכף, יחד הרים ירננו, לפני אדוני קיווה, קיווה לשפוט הארץ, לשפוט תבל בצדק, ועמים במישרים. ירם הים ומלואו, תבל ויושבי בה, נהרות דמחה וכף, יחד הרים ירננו, יחד הרים ירננו.
Okay, till tomorrow. Thank you.
Yes, till
Thank
tomorrow.
you, everybody. Thank you, Cantor Nimi and Rabbi Rapport, Harold and Yael. Wonderful to be in this, be in the class as a student. Thank you, everybody.
And tomorrow, 29, maybe
29.
93.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for visiting, Rabbi Kleinbaum.
I'll be back tomorrow. I'm back.
You promised?
Bli
You
neder,
promise.
as we say, you know, bli neder.
Okay. You all look so good. You all look so good. I'm so happy to see every face here.